Around 20 years ago, my parents decided that it would be best for me to have a hardship license when I was first learning to drive. The reason for them deciding that it was best for a 14-year-old to have a hardship license was because the private school I attended did not have a bus system to bus students to the school. But my parents also snuck in the fact that I would be driving my brother every day with me to school, but that's a different story. Well, as we all know, teenagers are the best drivers in the world, right? They pay attention to detail, they follow all rules of the road, and never try to impress anyone while they're driving. So yeah, my driving was going great. I loved it, right? Freedom at an even earlier age. Life was good. And I remember one afternoon driving home after basketball practice was over, and I was tired. Practice was good, but I was tired, so I decided to pump up the volume on the CD player and get home as fast as I could. Now, some of you guys won't even know what an in-CD player is because you've grown up in the world of MP3 players and AirPods. So here's a picture of one. It's pretty crazy since all we have to do now is Bluetooth to our phone, to the car, or our AirPods, and we're all good. No more CD binders and changing CDs every 3 minutes because there was only one good song on the whole album, but you had to buy the whole CD. Anyway, I had to take the freeway to and from school every day, and it wasn't ever a big deal. But this particular afternoon, though, traffic was backed up at the Air Force Base exit, and I got stopped at the traffic light right after you exit the freeway. And I remember that whatever song had ended that I was listening to, I wanted to change the CD to the new Goo Goo Dolls CD that had just come out and that I had just picked up because I wanted to hear their new song, Slide. I looked up and the light was still red, so I decided to go for it and change the CDs out. I ejected the one I was listening to and grabbed the new CD out of the binder and started to put it into the CD player. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the light had turned green while I was doing this, so I decided to step on the gas. What I hadn't noticed, though, was that no one in front of me had begun to move yet. So you can probably figure out what happened next. I rear-ended the vehicle in front of me. My first accident, all because I hadn't been paying attention. Right? I wrecked my '86 Honda Accord. And to this day, Jessica will say to me when I'm not paying attention while driving, and I quote, "You changing a CD?" End quote. Now, you just can't let that go. Tonight, we're going to talk about our need for humility and to be aware of what is happening around us. Last week, we started our series called Stand Strong, and we talked about several different ways that we can stand strong in our everyday lives. Right? We've talked about how to stand strong in our faith among those who don't share our beliefs. But tonight, we are talking about how to stand strong when Satan attacks. For some reason, people, Christians included, don't seem to like to talk about Satan. Right? We have no issue admitting that evil exists in the world. We don't mind acknowledging that we have struggles in our lives that we fight to overcome. But the moment that we bring up Satan, people get squeamish. People do not like the idea of the devil, an actual evil being, which wants nothing more than to keep people from a right relationship with God and diminish and destroy those of us who do have a right relationship with God. Why do you think that is? I mean, we acknowledge temptation in our life, but we don't want to acknowledge the source of the temptation. Well, Scripture makes it very clear, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find it more clearly stated than in the passage tonight, that Satan is actively trying to devour people of faith. So tonight we're briefly going to look at 3 principles that we can put into practice so that we can stand strong when, not if, Satan attacks. Well, this passage from 1 Peter 5, it's usually broken into 2 specific sermon topics, right? The importance of humility and fighting temptation. But I truly believe that Peter's intention when writing this was to show that the first 2 are essential for effectively fighting temptation. All right, take a look at the first step that Peter gives to stand strong during temptation. 1 Peter 5:5-7 says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time he will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. If you want to stand strong in the face of temptation, you have to admit that you can't do it on your own. Humility is the first step to fighting the devil and resisting temptation. In most of our English translations, verses 6 and 7 are two separate sentences, and they come across as two separate commands. Humble yourself and cast your anxiety. But in the original Greek, it is one sentence with only one command and a participle. Humble yourself by giving over all of your anxiety, all of your fears, all of your concerns over to him. Right, part of me wonders how often, when Peter was writing this letter, that his mind drifted to the years that he spent by Jesus' side. I wonder if when he wrote about humbly handing over anxiety to the one who cares for us, if his mind went to the time that he and the other disciples were anxious about what they were going to feed thousands of people who had gathered around to hear Jesus. I wonder if he was thinking about the time that Jesus consoled his friend Martha in Luke chapter 10 when she was worried about all the work that needed to be finished. Luke chapter 10 says this, "But the Lord said to her, 'My dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it.'" If you want to fight temptation, you need to practice humility by giving the things that tempt you, that make you worry and give you anxiety, over to the Lord. Right? Peter presents the next key for us in fighting temptation in verse 8. He says, "Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." If you want to fight Satan and resist temptation, all right, the second principle tonight is this. You have to be ready for what the devil throws at you. I had to memorize this verse that we just read in elementary school, and we used the King James Version because that made it easier for first graders to understand, but I have never forgotten it. It said, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." Don't you just love that word picture, that word play? The picture is of a lion looking for the weakest wildebeest in the herd, looking for that easy prey. Right? The scary truth about that is that Satan knows where we are the weakest, and that is where he goes after us. All right, Martin Luther wrote, "The devil climbs over the fence where it is the lowest." If we want to resist temptation, we need to be most vigilant where we are the weakest. Right? If you struggle with alcohol, you shouldn't spend time at certain kinds of parties or bars or nightclubs. Right? If you struggle with lust, you shouldn't watch anything that is on after 10 p.m. And maybe you should give up the freedom that comes from having the entirety of the internet in your pocket at all times. If stealing is a weakness, don't stay in a room where someone else's money is lying around unattended. If gossiping is a weakness, stop hanging out with those friends who are quick to spread the latest rumors about anyone. But if you continue to let yourself be influenced by these temptations, you only put yourself in the lion's den, and it will only be a matter of time before you are devoured. I think that most of the Christians that I know struggle most with implementing the final way that Peter presents to fight temptation and resist Satan. And it is this: know and remember that you are not the only one being tempted. 1 Peter 5:9 says, "Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. Remember that your family of believers all over the world is going through the same kind of suffering you are." We get the importance of humbling ourselves before God. I mean, he knows everything anyway, so we might as well tell him. Right? It just makes sense to put up our guard in the areas of our life where we trip up the most. But we really don't want to bring other people into the mix. We think that they won't understand what we are going through, or that they will judge us for struggling the way that we do. And so often we think that what we are going through is so unique to us in our particular situation that we just keep it to ourselves. But Scripture reminds us that what we are going through is not that unique. 1 Corinthians 10:13a says the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. There is nothing that we face that we really face alone. No temptation is unique to us. No weakness is unique to you. No struggle that I face is so unique that others can't understand it. And most importantly, no temptation, weakness, or struggle is big or strong enough that God's grace can't or won't overcome it. That is why both Peter and Paul stress the importance of involving others in fighting temptation. This is why it is important to surround yourself with Christian friends. This is why discipleship, or being led through spiritual disciplines by someone a little more mature in their faith than you, is so important. This is why small groups and our small group time is so important. It's so that we can see how God is strengthening and empowering our peers to resist temptation and the devil. I mean, can you imagine how disappointed the devil must have been at Jesus' resurrection? Here he thought he had defeated God's Son, but in reality, he had been totally defeated. And since the devil could not defeat Jesus, he has gone to plan B, which is attacking us. And if Satan had the gall to tempt the Son of God, he will have no trouble in tempting you and me. All right, we are going to face temptation. There is no way that we can control that, but we can fight temptation. And I would like to end tonight by sharing the second part of 1 Corinthians 10:13 with you. All right, we already read the temptations in your life are no different from what others experience. But the ending and promise that comes next from this verse is this: and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. Trust that God is in control, right? Remain watchful. Pay attention to your blind spots or your weaknesses, and remember that you are not alone. Right? Take courage and comfort from those who are fighting around you.